Welcome to the Creating Wealth Podcast, where Kyle Curtin takes you on an extraordinary journey alongside renowned multifamily real estate sponsors and syndication experts from every corner of the United States. We teach you how to harness the power of passive real estate investing and witness the transformation of your wealth building strategy. Let's create wealth together.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. What is going on? This is Kyle from the Creating Wealth Podcast. And today I have a little tip for you guys that has really blown my mind. And this tip was introduced to me earlier this year, or at least the existence of it, rather. And then I ended up, finding that this is something that, a lot of other successful folks, investors in particular, also tend to do in their journey. So essentially, your capital, right? Everybody, wants to leverage their capital for a return. Hopefully it's double digit. Hopefully it's, for a year or 2 years, 5 to 7 years, whatever your cup of tea is. And, you take your money, you put it in a certain place, you do a certain activity, you do X, Y, Z, let it grow, let it make some friends, and then bring your original amount plus the friends back to you, right? Makes a whole lot of sense. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. And what I mean by that is there's ways to stretch your capital a lot further than just a return. And what I mean by that is essentially using your capital to not only make a return, but also to help you accelerate your career, to open up doors, to be able to create new relationships, all while getting paid at the same time. And to go into a little bit more detail, essentially what I'm talking about is leveraging the capital that you have, like I mentioned, not only for a good return, because obviously you're not just giving it to someone for free. I really hope not. Or, leveraging something that should not be leveraged to be able to, do opportunities and, investment opportunities and that kind of thing that is completely unsafe and insanely risky. But to be able to take the capital that you have, yes, make a return on it, but leverage it in very specific and strategic and tactical places with very strategic and tactical people that are several rungs, if not many more rungs up the ladder than you are. So an example that I want to throw out there is at the beginning of this year, I ended up leveraging some capital that I had in the form of a promissory note with a partner just for a year. It was 10%. And I knew that I, was in zero position to buy another property. I had my hands full with a lot of different things, in a lot of areas of my life that I was like, man, like I'm still trying to straighten out my Lemonster building. I'm trying to figure out the MTR thing. I'm trying to jump into this, that, the other, and do, these things, whatever. And I knew that I wasn't going to buy another property for the entirety of this year, and what I leveraged was in the form of a home equity line, and it is debt, right? And the rate was pretty high. I'll leave it at that. So basically what I ended up doing was I ended up investing this with a future partner that I have an excellent relationship with now for a year. And essentially what it opened up my eyes to was essentially the impact that your capital can have on the doors that get opened. So not only, like I mentioned, was I getting a double-digit return, but I was also, more importantly, using that as a vehicle to accelerate my career, to accelerate relationships, and essentially continue to grow, at a much more rapid pace by doing this particular type of investment. Because it essentially, like, in essence, in my opinion, it grew the relationship pretty fast. And I absolutely, still have that relationship today, and I'm insanely happy that I did this. Um, and I'll be getting my principal back in a few months and that type of thing. And some friends along with it, you know what I mean? But that first opened up my eyes in terms of, like, using your capital to level up. You can, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of, pretty good investors that, pick up buildings here or there, that, do a bunch of flips, that do this, that, the other. Everybody is always looking for private money, and that's the name of the game. You know what I mean? In terms of scalability, because you can only go so far in this real estate investing space with your own capital. It's you can play the game by yourself and be very successful. It's more than likely going to take forever and a freaking day, to be able to do that, and, pick up, a building a year or a building every other year, whatever, unless you're getting paid a pretty fat salary, or, a ton on commission, or a mixture of both, or whatever your situation looks like. And if you're making a ton, you may or may not have the time to be able to pick up, a lot of these type of properties, and, actively manage them yourself, or, turn them over yourself, or manage the property manager if you, are hiring a PM on that. So it might make sense for you to invest passively in, like, a syndication, or, a promissory note, type of investment anyway, because you physically just don't have the time or bandwidth to continue, So my thoughts on this are that it can be incredibly useful to leverage capital that you have. And I say this in a very open way, because basically I'm introducing you guys a principle that I didn't realize until earlier, this year in 2023. Not necessarily like a tactical, like, oh, do this for 1 year here and that the other. I'm probably not qualified to tell you physically what to do with your money. more often, more likely than not, because I'm not a tax advisor or any of that stuff. I'm just a dude who likes real estate, an investor, etc. But anyway, to get back on track. So essentially, the absolute power that can come from, using your capital to open up doors and leverage it for a lot more than just a return is something that can be tremendous. When done correctly, in an application that fits for both you and the person that, you're investing it with, for the type of time horizon you have, for the type of risk tolerance that you have, for the type of collateral and documentation that's involved. This is something that can be crazy. Now, without going into too much detail, a friend of mine also does this topic, and I found out, this principle, and I found out about it in a conversation we were having much later on in the year, where he does this with billionaires. So he has many, many, many more rungs above the ladder than I am, or up the ladder than I am, in the investment ecosystem. And he leverages, capital that he has to be able to network with, folks that are worth, 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures, and that type of thing. Or more than 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures. What's a billionaire? That's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 9 figures. I'm sorry, or 10 figures rather. I apologize, but I've been so excited to do this little episode and introduce this concept to a lot of people out there that kind of slipped my mind how many zeros were actually involved in that part of the equation, with that story, but. Yeah, so a friend of mine does this literally with billionaires. And the conversation came up because I actually asked him, I was like, man, I'm like, just out of curiosity, I'm like, do you, how do you feel about investing passively, in syndications and, notes and whatever? Like what's your cup of tea, where he's at on the ladder that's many, many, rungs up, than I am. Like, how do you like to, what does your allocation look like, in terms of active and passive? Like, do you dabble in passive? Anyway, so the conversation ended up just coming up, and he told me this. And he's like, yeah, man, I do invest passively, but I leverage my capital a lot more than just the physical numbers, just the numbers in the bank account, the percentage, the numbers on the screen. I'd leverage my capital to open up doors and progress my growth in this whole entire thing. And it really, made my ears perk up, because I had heard of this principle much, much earlier in the year, and hearing it much later on a much more granular scale, and kind of hearing how it can be done on a much higher level, you know what I mean? And the fact that, someone of his, stature is doing something like that, it's absolutely incredible. So, and again, guys, like I mentioned, a lot of us are active investors out there. It may or may not make sense to, invest $50,000, with someone for a year in a certain situation, or, it doesn't really fit your goals, like this, that, the other. And like I said, just consider it. And again, like, you want to do it in a way that makes sense, and you also want to do it with an amount of capital that makes sense. So, like, offering to lend somebody like $5,000 probably isn't going to get you anywhere. But say you have, 50, 100, 200, 250,000 laying around, and you're looking to, level up your network. Use your capital to level up your network. Or guys, even like, make a list of, some of the folks that you want to get pretty close with, that are, much, much higher up on the ladder than you are at the moment. Make a list, and, just try to get in the same rooms as these folks, through meetups, through jumping on calls on Facebook, through, sending messages on this, that, the other, going back and forth on, Facebook, Instagram, like, social media and that kind of thing. And, if you determine that it could be a right fit, it could be a pretty solid move to allocate, a bit of money, or rather, I should say, start here. Don't just, wire over $50,000. Start here. Like, basically, if you have somebody out there that, you've kind of started to build a decent relationship with, and you would like to really increase that relationship, quickly, as well as having it be a mutual benefit to both parties, because do not let it be a one-sided engagement. It needs to be beneficially mutual to both parties. Always, 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 always. Then it could be something that, could be worth a conversation with them in a one-on-one setting of like, hey man, I got some money laying, that I am looking to put to work. Like, I'd love to hear about some of the projects that you have coming up in the near future. Maybe we can JV on something together. Just, open the question, and see what they respond with, and go from there, And guys, basically my long-awaited point here, and I feel like I'm repeating myself a million times, but this is something that can be incredibly powerful if used correctly. And keep in mind to be very safe as well. Make sure, you get that promissory note signed. If it's, in a setting like that, make sure that you have it reviewed by an attorney, have your attorney approve it, and all that fun stuff. And make sure you're safe, and yeah, just keep this type of principle in the back of your mind. That, say you do have some capital that's laying aside, and, you're not really in a position to buy another property, like don't really want to lock it up for 5 to 7 years in a syndication or something like that, and also want to increase your network at the same time. Keep this in mind. because doing this kind of thing can potentially get you in some rooms and around some folks that are significantly different than letting that money sit in a bank account, or, you know, waiting another year, a couple years to buy another property, you know. And yeah, you know, just see what happens. Again, you know, like I mentioned, guys, make sure that you are very, very safe when you do something like this. Make sure that it's very, you know, mutually beneficial across both parties. If like there's some weird, sketchy stuff going on, it could be a red flag. You definitely want to be careful. Have your attorney review everything. Make sure everything is in black and white on paper. And yeah, you know, go out there and see what you can do, and just keep this in the back of your mind. And keep in mind the story that I just mentioned to you about, you know, my buddy who leverages this same exact technique that I used on a much smaller scale. For me, it was a $50,000 investment. But for my buddy, that could be 100,000, $500,000, to be able to, you know, get a seat at the table with folks that are worth 10 figures. And this can be used pretty much anywhere in between that spectrum, you know, and money talks, as they say, you know, and if it's done in a safe manner, in the right place, at the right time, with the right person, you can leverage your capital and unlock several benefits more than just a monetary return. And think about it on a deeper level than just surface level. Like, yeah, you know, I want 12%. I want it to be outside of Boston. I want it to be in Western Mass. I want it to be in freaking Albuquerque, like Kentucky, like Miami, like whatever you're into, you know, that's great. You know, you definitely, it needs to make sense from a monetary perspective, right? But also more, I don't want to say more importantly, because it sounds kind of weird. It comes off a little weird, but more importantly, how can you use the capital that you have in a very, very specific place that aligns with your vision to get to the next place and potentially accelerate that path by being able to open up doors and create certain relationships that you get closer to, you know, relatively quickly, and see where it goes. I would love to hear stories from, you know, other folks out there that have done this. It worked out well for me. I'm very, very glad that I did it. And, you know, this first time around, and I'm definitely going to, you know, utilize that principle in the future, you know, as time goes on and that kind of thing, and, you know, use it as kind of a tool and a point of leverage, you know, to continue, you know what I mean? And hopefully accelerate the journey as quickly as possible and keep running, you know? But, that's pretty much all for today, my friends. I am very, very, very curious, you know, who else has done this type of thing out there, how it's worked for you, if it's worked great, if it's worked, you know, in an unfortunate type of way. Shoot me a message on Facebook or send me an email. It's Kyle, Kyle, at creatingwealth.com, KCREatingwealth.com. And yeah, this is the final solo episode of 2023, guys, as well. You know, I wanted to thank you very, very much for all the support, you know, for the past 3+ years, but also for this year in particular. It's been a heck of a lot of fun. And I'm very excited to jump into the new year with you guys, you know, and have a killer time. You know, meet some cool people, build some cool relationships, do some deals, make some money, you know, create abundant lives, help people create abundant lives. And that is all, my friends, and see where life takes us. Alrighty. I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic Wednesday. I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day.
That's a wrap for today's episode. We want to thank you for being a valued listener of the Creating Wealth Podcast. Make sure to visit www.creatingwealth.com to connect with us. Dive into our ever-expanding library of informative blogs. get access to our private investor portal, and explore a wide range of additional valuable resources. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to create wealth together.